Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. I am your host, Patty Rose. My guest today for the 7th time is a dear friend, host of his own podcast, the Broken Class podcast, my dear friend, Thomas Hiura. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, homie. I've seen this intro on the other side of the computer so many times, so it's nice to be back here, seeing it on this side.
Yeah, this is the first time we've done it like this. This setup, you've been in-house a couple times, but it's always a treat to have you. This was on short notice, and so bear with us because I've been in Washington, D.C., and I just got back. I'm going to talk a little bit about this at the end of this episode, about that trip. It was pretty phenomenal, some of the stuff that we got to do. But, you know, it's been 9 days since the midterm election. California is still counting votes to decide the winners in the House, I think. Is that true? I might be kidding. I know that they've taken a long time, but it has now been announced that the Republicans will take control of the House of Representatives, but by a much thinner margin than originally expected. Nancy Pelosi is not only handing over the gavel, she is stepping down from leadership of the Democrats in the House, and it sounds like Hakeem Jeffries is the front runner to take over. So that's pretty big news. That actually happened, I think, today.
Yeah, heck yeah, we're breaking that.
Yeah, we're the ones breaking it. Yeah,
no doubt. I think she was in office since 1987. She's still going to have her representative seat for that district in San Francisco area, but she will not be the Speaker of the House. She will not be on that Democratic leadership side. So that's a woman who she became the first woman Speaker of the House in the W years.
Yeah.
So it's an institution essentially.
You know, and like her or not, I mean, and I know there's a lot of people on the right that despise her, but the reality, and on the left actually in some ways. But the thing is that she is somebody that has gotten a lot done. So her record is, I mean, she was somebody that has gotten a lot of bills through because she knew how to get it done. One of the things I want to mention is I was looking just on the socials and I saw AOC commenting. People were asking her if she's going to vie for it. And she was like, first of all, where I'm at, no, in the position that I'm at, because of the way that she stands up to leadership in the party, for one, and also because she's new. I mean, she's young still relatively, and she's got progressive ideals. And she said, sometimes you don't actually get to do the things that you want because you have to settle in order to get the votes. And so I want to tip my cap as a Democrat to Nancy Pelosi for her career because of the fact that she kind of was a bridge and that she brought people to the, you know, to the middle of whatever the party is, whatever that means, and was able to get a lot done, namely, you know, with Obama getting, even though there wasn't the single payer option, but getting Affordable Health Care Act to go through was a big deal.
Yeah. A lot of strong, sweeping legislative accomplishments. And what I saw from her speech today, she mentioned that when she began, there were 12 Democratic women in the House, and now there were over 90.
Wow.
And so it really is part of seeing the Congress look a little more like the country, as long as they're also serving the interests of, you know, everyday working class people and people from, you know, normal, marginalized, non-elite communities, then I'm chilling.
Right. So back to the election, the Democrats won the Senate, which is a big shock, actually, to a lot of people. And they've secured the power of the Senate even before the Georgia runoff. I think the most notable winner is John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, who won running on Medicare for All in a swing state and won by a bigger margin than Biden did in 2020. Progressive policies are much more popular than the corporate Democrats would like to admit. Would you agree with that?
I think that there's many examples that are suitably, yeah, I would agree with that on some level. I think that minimum wage is something that has been opposed, for example, in key moments by Kyrsten Sinema, even though she tweeted years ago, #raise the wage. We live in a government that's bought and sold in many ways by corporate lobbying and corporate interests. So even if you hold values that the public would support and that everyday folks would really benefit from and would be an example of making the government really work for them, getting towards that space where it's really passing and becoming law in the same, you know, pure way without being compromised by a whole bunch of other crap is important and difficult. So it's almost like with the amount of people in the House, for example, like there's enough human beings in the House and then 100 of them still in the Senate, where it just doesn't seem that hard to buy enough of the votes you need if you are a multi-billionaire person who is connected with the interests of other people in that strata of society. My thing, I'm a little bit moderate. I like rich people. I just don't really believe that the richest of rich people, because when I say rich people, like millionaires and stuff.
Yeah, that's not even
I know
that.
people, yeah,
Anymore, that's not even that much money. It's,
right.
I mean, that'll get you like 10 gallons of gas. But
right.
Yeah.
But if you have over $100 million, you have to really prove yourself to me for me to like you.
Right.
Because I don't want to sound biased, but I don't see how a person, unless they're really investing a lot of that back in, or donating, or making a significant difference in enough of a way that you need to have that money. And people who employ people too, I get that. That's cool. It just, mostly there's an exploitative nature to how one would accrue that much. And so I'm generalizing, but
there's no such thing as a self-made billionaire. That's a fact. That you did not do that alone. That's impossible. So you were talking about lobbyists, and I wanted to mention something that I learned in DC, that when Grant was president, right? So Ulysses S. Grant, he would hang out it was new at the time, but Old Ebbitt's Grill, and he would hang out because he didn't like hanging out in the White House. He felt like it was too stuffy for him. And I learned, I mean, this is an anecdotal thing that was told on a tour bus, but still, and so you'd hang out at Old Ebbitt's Grill, and people would hang out in the lobby that they didn't want to get a table because they weren't planning on eating, but they were trying to like talk to him.
Right.
And that's where the name lobbyists came from.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, at least that's what they said on the tour bus. It's kind of interesting.
I could see that
they were like, those lobbyists over there, don't give them any time or day. Go to DC, and we're going to talk about it a little bit at the end, but man, yeah, we'll get to that later. So let's, the Democrats, like I said, avoided the much anticipated red wave, and the Republican Party looks like they have a Donald Trump problem. It sounds trickle. Like, his endorsement is actually as hurtful as it is helpful. Would you agree with that assessment?
Depends on where you are. Herschel Walker hasn't lost yet.
That's true.
Kerry Lake galvanized enough of a base to be competitive, but that state in Arizona is just any statewide race, man, governor or Senate. Those races require people that can actually appeal to enough people. And one of the things that I feel we learned through this election, this is our third election in a row, national election, a repudiation of Trumpism. Third in a row that we've had that, plus like things like the Georgia runoffs. And so that's when I see that people are smart enough to say we're kind of done with that, and we're done with election denying as being the key component offering you give as a candidate. What public policy offering?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it's not a good way to win elections. And so people have repudiated that in this election, and I'm very, very glad to see that.
Yeah.
But JD Vance, he beat Tim Ryan.
That was a tough one.
Because
Tim Ryan, I'm actually a fan of, especially for Ohio. I think that he ran a really good campaign, and he got handled. I mean, he lost pretty handily. It was, and it was rough because I like having him in the Senate.
Yeah.
And
Kerry with Fetterman, you brought up earlier, I didn't get to comment. Sorry,
go ahead.
Need to get to comment on everything, but that is a template that I hope Democrats take and understand. When I look at what I hope that the Democrat Party learns from this experience, I hope it's not that that we don't need to offer big policy change, right? That we just need to emphasize the very real and urgent threat to reproductive rights. That was majorly emphasized, and that galvanized enough people, especially young people, to come out in a midterm, and that was how we won. It was an amazingly successful strategy. But I do also hope that economic proposals that are working class oriented and that cater to the working poor and families, those also continue to be kind of at the forefront of the Democratic legislative agenda. It's going to be weird now with divided government. The House is only going to probably pass bills that are really distasteful to the Senate, to the democratically controlled Senate. But I hope that people see that the way that John Fetterman ran and what he focused on, in spite of immense challenges, health challenges in the campaign and questions about that, he was able to succeed, and not even by a tiny margin. He beat that guy, Mehmet Oz.
I do think that, I mean, and John Fetterman won big time because I think he's pretty popular, but Mehmet Oz is not even from Pennsylvania. I mean, he's from New Jersey. There's a lot of reasons not to vote for Dr. Oz, and so I think that there was a lot of pretty terrible candidates on the right that Trump has created this brand of reality television politics that is absolutely disgusting and needs to go away. That it's not even, I mean, for one, you can't throw a fit when you don't get your way. That's not how the world works. Things are slow in Washington and across the country for a reason, because we don't want fringe people on either extreme to come in and just completely turn things on their head. That's actually causes disruption in our financial sector. Like, there's so many things that are dangerous when you just flip things on their head. And the people that they've put out there are, I mean, Dr. Oz is a snake oil salesman,
no doubt.
And so, but John Fetterman is somebody that
extremely media trained.
Yeah. And John Fetterman was you talked about election denial. John Fetterman was made popular on protecting our elections, as the lieutenant governor, and so,
right.
so was Katie Hobbs in Arizona,
and as the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania.
Right. And so,
took really to heart the safety of his citizens. He when a person died violently in Braddock while John Fetterman was mayor, he would get the date that it occurred tattooed on, I believe, his arm.
Is that what that is? Wow.
Yeah. And just that kind of person who the Democrats have lost some territory, honestly, with certain demographic groups, and men are amongst them.
Big time. Sometimes me.
Yeah, non-college educated men, not just white.
No,
Hispanic and Black and Asian racial and ethnic background as well. And we should think about why that is. And I don't believe that means we have to compromise on things like reproductive rights or on.
I mean, I think that it becomes an issue of what is government's role in some of the culture wars, because society can have those conversations all they want, but where is government's role? That's the debate. A lot of people are like, we need to be debating on infrastructure and economics and stuff like that. Societal stuff is society's job.
When I talk about this election proving that you should run on things that really matter to people and that really materially affect and positively benefit people's lives, another example of that is because they're part of why the Republicans dropped the ball so badly. Imagine going into the fourth quarter with Dame Lillard on your team and Anthony Simons, and you're up,
Bo Nix against Washington,
25 points with 6 minutes left, and you lose. That's essentially what the Republicans did. And why? I believe it's in part because they only ran on inflation is bad and you don't know what a woman is, and these just blown out of proportion cultural hot points and just economic accusation without remedy.
There's no strategy.
All they said was spending is bad and that caused inflation. That is such first grade assessment.
We're gonna talk about Alex Carlotto said that he was gonna fight to lower costs for women's health care. What the hell does that even mean when a guy that's
He wasn't. It was super silly, sly wording, and he wasn't talking about reproductive. He was talking about women and their health, but
it's going to lower costs for healthcare.
Talking about women's health.
He can lower costs for healthcare as a whole when there's a ton of people that now do not have healthcare. That was the way that they would lower costs. It lowers costs for the affluent because the poor people now don't have coverage.
Yeah, the people that are still able to be healthy, you're going to do better, homie. Because
so let's talk about some of the races in Oregon. I mean, we'll start with the governor. Start at the top. Tina Kotek takes it. This was extremely, extremely close, which is not typical for Oregon, but did not come as much of a surprise to me. I want to talk about Betsy Johnson first. I've mentioned her a lot on the podcast. I personally think that even though she only got around 9%, and I was expecting more like 19, 9% is slim. And I think that a lot of people, there was this standoff where people were like, I got to make the better. It's interesting. I think people are finally getting the note that you have to protest vote in a primary, and in a general election, you're going to have to pick two of the main top ticket candidates. One of the other.
Ultimately, as it became close to the election and I saw the polls, it was clear she wasn't going to get like 10, 11, 12, 19, 20.
And those probably swayed people.
But early on, that's true. Early on, I did not think that she would go as low as she did. And I think one of the things that hurt her is just simply not being a presence at all in the primary. Not being on any ballots at all in the primary. She just did her petition campaign. Very impressive. Obviously a well-connected person. And we talked about rich people earlier. She comes from pretty big money.
Yeah.
But she and I went to the same college, many decades apart, but I have met her. I have a certain amount of respect for her. And what I don't like about her campaign was that I mean, she has every right to run and she had the right to bring herself into the conversation. But I also think that as the writing was on the wall, her reason for staying in the race had a little more to do with just the fact she didn't want Tina Kotek in office and believed Drazen would be a better choice.
Well, and I hope Tina Kotek has learned from watching
and
the way that.
And then the right, actually, a lot of people that I see think that the opposite's true.
No, I know. Betsy Johnson, it depends on what side that people fall on, that they're like, she's just this and that. You know, it's not. No, I hope Tina Kotek takes to heart what was happening in this election and why Christine Drazen received, 46% of the 47, whatever percent of the vote. That was a lot. Because there's a lot of people that are really frustrated with what's happening in our streets in Springfield. And I'm not trying to be anti-homeless or any of that stuff, but there's a lot of people that do not like the idea of tent cities. And Tina Kotek talked about, she tried really hard to distance herself from a Kate Brown leadership. And I don't think it's fair to say that she's going to be Kate Brown. They're different people. You know what I'm saying? But I do hope that she does things that keeps some of the people that voted for her from the right, even, because that does happen, or from the middle. I hope she keeps what they said to heart when she actually runs or when she actually is in office, because in a campaign, you bump elbows with people that you agree with, people that you don't agree with, people that are abhorrent. The people that are abhorrent, you might have to ignore, but the people in the middle that actually have some ideas, I hope the people that won these elections listen to those people a little bit.
It would be wrong for her to not give a thorough chance to the people and the points that were articulated to her by those people. I agree. And also the reciprocal is true. Those people who are upset that she won, I hope that they give her a chance.
I agree. I mean, I will say this: when Donald Trump was elected president, yes, my hair was on fire. It's red. But like the thing is that I hoped, I had this sliver of hope in 2016 that he would be different than the typical two-party system, and that he might be able to be like, look, like call balls and strikes on his own team. Boy, was I wrong. He was a monster. But I was right all along. I had this hope in the back of my mind that he would be different, and it was just not the way that it works. I mean,
you could probably find a couple policy issues where his willingness to buck the orthodoxy had some benefit.
I mean, a broken clock is.
I have no problem saying that, and I don't feel the need to point to specific things because I don't really want to. No, I've found there's some things. The problem is, while those things and those accomplishments exist, you really have just a person who has 100 times over taken the destruction of some of our most sacred and important principles, like a democratic process, like general, humane equity for immigrants, etc. That person, he's just shit on those things so many times and gleefully done so. So it's hard for me to want to do the correct, I think, nuanced evaluation. But the other part of having a nuanced evaluation is knowing that, like, all presidents have done really bad things. All presidents have done things all U.S. presidents have seriously harmed a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, there was that one guy who died while giving his speech. Maybe he didn't. And there's another one who died within like 3 weeks of getting in office. Maybe they get off the hook, man, because I don't like to use unequivocal language that much.
He might have tore shit up in his first 100 days, dude. You don't know. Are you talking about, is it Cleveland?
I don't remember. Between presidents 8 and about 15, no one knows and cares much about them unless they're historic.
You'll not be talking shit on Taft. No. Anyway, let's move on. So, Oregon's 4th congressional district. And wait, did you have any more you wanted to talk about Tina Kotek?
I'm very appreciative of so many of the elements of her campaign, and I think that one difference I can articulate between Brown and Kotek, if people want to know, is that Kate Brown had a very consensus, a slower, more deliberate process that was probably characterized by consensus-driven thinking, whereas Tina Kotek has shown a very rambunctious, aggressive, and sometimes quick way of trying to get legislative accomplishments taken care of. And so there's an urgency with Kotek that I think is a little different than Brown.
Yeah.
That's just my.
No, I like you said, I think you nailed it when you said you hope that the people that did not vote for her give her a shot. And I think
Kotek is mentioned in my 2019 video I made in my campaign, actually.
Nice.
Because she was calling for a state of emergency on homelessness.
And so she ran on that, and it's not a lie. It's true that she was doing that. Nobody was listening to her. So we'll see. On that. We'll see what happens. I do have a comment from a listener, Mayor Sean Van Gordon. Shout out to Mayor Sean Van Gordon. It was William Harrison who was the person that died after 3 months. Thank you so much for that. And congratulations, Sean Van Gordon, on a re-election for the mayor of Springfield. Even though he ran unopposed, he was out there campaigning, and he's a great mayor for Springfield, and we're glad to have you in office.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to know that he's watching. So thank you for that. I have been trying to brush up on a lot of my presidential history, but once you precede the second Roosevelt, again, there's a big gap between Lincoln and when I start caring, and it just is what it is.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So now let's move on to Congress. Oregon's 4th Congressional. Val Hoyle defeated Alex Skarlatos. Alex Skarlatos defeated himself in this election, and I think it was a lot closer than it should be, because I think that the qualifications were super imbalanced. I think that Val Hoyle, she can call her a career politician, or you can call her someone that knows how actual leadership works. I think that she has fought for workers' rights. I've said it ad nauseum. I think all the people that were in her campaign ads and stuff, even though the ones that were about her, not about Alex Skarlatos, I think they believed what they were saying, because she has gone to bat for them. I will say this, that campaign got ugly, and I don't think anybody likes the negative attack ads, but unfortunately,
it was overwhelming.
It definitely was inundating. And I think a lot of people, it scores no points, but I think that getting it out there, what kind of person Alex Skarlatos was, is something that needed to be done. And I'm happy to see that a vetting process for the voters can be effective, because I mean, that's what an election is for, is to make sure that you're not putting someone in that's a monster. And I'm not saying he's a monster. I mean, he was young, and maybe down the road he might be able to do some stuff. And I don't think a comment you made on a podcast years before, but we're not talking decades before, we're talking 2018.
Yeah. The same year he ran for Douglas County Commissioner, I believe. It would be a disservice, I believe, to the over a decade of strong, sturdy legislative and executive leadership that Val Hoyle has shown, for me to talk too much about the Skarlatos guy in our segment on CD4.
Fair.
I'll say one thing, which is that he probably ran reasonably intelligently, but was compromised by a lack of relevant experience that was evident to people, and those comments and sort of just silly antics and being the Dancing with the Stars candidate. I mean,
yeah,
I do have a feeling we'll probably see him run for something again in our lifetimes, because you and I are probably going to, knock on wood, live for another 30, 40, 50 years.
I don't got it in me.
But Val Hoyle's an enormously talented and coalition building leader. She, I believe she is a really good choice for this district. And I first met her in like 2013, I believe, 2013, lobbying on behalf of volunteer lobbying, not paid lobbyists. We were talking about that, but
just hanging out in the lobby
for some environmental concerns, and bringing those to her when she was only a state representative of House District 14. And yeah, she's always been a real straight shooter, and I hope that she can make the connections needed to affect the legislative agenda of the U.S. House of Representatives in a positive way for 2 years, at least, until she's reelected. Because is it going to be Kevin McCarthy be the House Speaker?
I don't think so.
I believe it is, because I believe Rick Scott tried to challenge him, but it will be Kevin McCarthy. So the legislative agenda, it's probably going to be concerning to people like with my worldview. But having Val Hoyle in there, I hope she continues to build on the excellent legacy of constituent services.
Yeah. So West Lane County Commissioner, this is a really important one. The West Lane County Commissioner, is it West? It's West.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. West Lane County Commissioner seat is going to change the direction of the county dramatically. Wins by Ryan Senega and David Lovall in the Springfield area will shift the balance of power on the county board to a conservative majority. I've said this before in the past. Conservatives have had the majority for most of the past. It's been recent that it switched. And we saw a lot of changes in the structure of government, especially in Springfield. There's been a lot of good things that have happened by some conservatives in Springfield, and I will say that. But that being said, we've noticed a shift in the treatment of marginalized groups in language that's used in Springfield. And I just wonder how much of that's going to stay. You know, we'll see. It's going to be a very different leadership. And what's happening in the West Lane County area, which it goes all the way to the coast, but I believe it covers River Road as well, right?
Santa Clara, north of Beltline, there's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
And so there's a lot happening in that area where there's a lot of people mobilized on the conservative side that are not going to go away without making, they're not going to go away at all. Ryan Senega, and he got on the school board, and then he did this, and it's going to be interesting to see a change in leadership. I don't think the world's going to end or anything like that, but I do definitely think it's going to be a lot different the way that the county approaches stuff.
Yeah, I mean, with a 5-person board, every member brings a large, shift to any potential discussion. Lovall's outspoken. It's probably we're going to hear him talking about a lot of things he doesn't believe in and that are previous priorities of the county. I don't know much about Senega. Nice to know that he's been on a school board. I think anybody who's been on a school board might be able to bring some knowledge, but I was definitely wanting Don Leslie to win that one. And I really believe in her super, super strongly in whatever avenue she chooses to insert her voice into the public discourse. But you haven't mentioned Heather Buck in the Eastern District, which she won her election in May and won now to be the reelected commissioner. She hasn't been there all that long. This is her only
she
first
may be
re-election.
The president of the board too, is she?
I could see that.
I don't know if she is currently or if she was.
I don't remember who took it after Bernie. I think it was her.
Heather Buck.
I think it was her. Well, she's a really astute, studious person.
Yeah, and she's done. I mean, one of the things that county board, what I've learned from doing the show, and also with my partner working for the county, the thing that Lane County does, I mean, their job is really emergency response. I mean, it's one of the major areas, and it's something that Heather Buck has shined in emergency response with the Holiday Farms fire. And, we just continue to see fires in Oak Ridge and all this, or the threat of fire. And I think we narrowly missed it, this last summer, but
she's been working on rural broadband as well.
She's been crushing it. And
the county is a real service provider in a way that a lot of the municipalities within it cannot really compete, so that leadership is really important. We'll keep a close eye, and I do want to avoid over partisanizing and thinking about what majority exists where. I mean,
that's fair because it is a nonpartisan seat.
Isn't that a rigidifying, sort of idea? That's
fair.
I believe that Commissioner Farr would probably say, on some things I'm conservative, on some things he's quite progressive.
Yeah, that's fair. And that's good. But that's one thing I like about a board.
Commissioner Farr has a trans child and is absolutely just in love with his trans
and that's what I love about a board in some ways, where it's a group of people that they communicate with each other, much like how the Supreme Court works or supposed to work, like that. It's a group of people with different ideas that come together and then they ultimately vote and decide,
the classic
city council
Ginsburg-Scalia friendship.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
They went to opera together.
So we'll not just, not pull our hair out that the majority is shifting.
I'm still just very happy with how well this election went on so many fronts.
In a lot of ways. Locally, though, it was interesting because it seems like it went pretty well for the Democrats nationwide, but locally it feels like there was definitely a pushback on some of the Democratic stronghold, and so that's the way that things go when you have power for a long time. So real last thing on that, what are some areas that you think that we'll see almost immediate changes and the most changes with the new leadership? I think I kind of just mentioned one major one that, we'll see with emergency response, but I think that that's going to be fine. I think that we're going to be good there.
Well, there are certainly different ideas with regard to public health.
Yeah. And absolutely. And how we approach homelessness. I mean, during COVID, if we had this leadership, things would have been dramatically different. So take that for what it is. It would have, there's no question in my mind that businesses would have ran without closing their doors.
Right.
And I'm not saying that as a good or bad. I'm just saying that there would be a difference in leadership. I don't know the right answer to that. I'm not the person to ask. I'm just saying it would have been much different.
Yeah.
The Along Came Trudies would have. Yeah. Anyway. So ballot measures, we're going to go over some of those. There's other seats, obviously, that we could mention before we move on, but Floyd Przansky wasn't a very contested race. James Manning
he defeated Raquel Ivey.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of close margin.
Yeah, no big surprises. Christina Stevenson,
she beat Sherry Helt for the Bowley commissioner. Yeah,
right, for Lane County commissioner. So that's that was kind of expected. And then
for labor
commissioner. Sorry. So
Nancy Nathanson defeated Tim Sutherland in House District 13. Nancy Nathanson has not been defeated in, I think, her entire legislative career.
Yeah.
Used to be on the Eugene City Council. Ran for mayor against Kitty Piercy in 2004, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the congressional race that got national attention? McLeod Skinner.
Yeah. Well, Andrea Salinas as well versus Mike Erickson. It's pretty amazing. 2 Latinas will be elected from Oregon to Congress. 1 Republican and 1 Democrat.
Well, that's good representation.
Yeah. Lori Chavez Dreamer, the former mayor of Happy Valley. I think some of her campaigning was slippery. You move to the general and you try to disavow some of the stop the steely stuff that she said before. And, when it comes to the integrity of our elections, I think I can't point at her and say you should have learned your lesson because she did win. But I hope people that traffic in discourse that isn't propped up by evidence.
Yeah.
Right.
Or lies.
If you have real solid evidence, that's a different scenario. But discourse that isn't propped up by evidence, which is like the almost entire majority of people saying stop the steal and Trump with winning the 2020 election. Yeah, we don't want to see that. That's not fighting for. We elect people to fight for the concerns of people trying to make it in the world. I don't elect somebody because they did a really good job propping up some liar.
Right.
So
yeah, moving on, we're going to talk about ballot measures in Oregon on your Lane County ballot. This, I think, broke today. I think that the actual results were decided today. The healthcare bill, changing the language in the Oregon Constitution that requires Oregon to offer healthcare as a human right, affordable healthcare. I'm not sure what that means, affordable healthcare necessarily. I was a strong supporter of this because it starts moving us in a direction towards universal healthcare. It's going to be extremely difficult to get universal healthcare if it's only the state that's funding it. That's going to be very difficult because there's just not enough money. And we might be able to get some federal help on this. And that's my hope. And I hope that this actually gets some traction nationwide, because I think it's a pretty popular thing nationwide. I am a firm believer in universal healthcare because we have way too many people that fall through the cracks, and then way too many places where you're stuck in a job that you hate because you don't want to lose your healthcare for even a month if you're relying on insulin or anxiety medicine to function or whatever it is. It's just something that I talk about healthcare ad nauseum, about how important universal healthcare would be for our society in so many different ways. One of them, I was going to be so irritated if this didn't pass, and I thought it hadn't passed, to be honest with you. But one of the ways that I've tried to talk to people that were very pro Second Amendment and very just gun, that's why they vote, number one issue, and we're going to talk about 114 in a second. But here was an opportunity that I see that people are like, well, it's not about the gun, it's about people's mental health. And I'm like, okay, can we make sure that people actually have access to healthcare then? And they're like, well, no. It's like nobody wants to ever do anything about healthcare because they're like, I'm fine. I have health insurance through my employer. I don't really worry about anyone else. I've even had people tell me, I did an episode about healthcare, and I had a guy message me and he said, do you understand how long it would take for it to be seen? Right now, he's like, if you're on OHP, sometimes it takes you months to get seen. And I'm like, do you understand why and what you're saying? You're saying that once we open up accessibility to other individuals so that everybody has the ability to be seen by a doctor, then that makes it harder. Yes, that may be true to an extent. But that being said, that is a very messed up way of looking at the world. Like, that's like saying, like, I have this plate full of food and you're hungry. If I give you a quarter of my food, you'll be full, but I'm going to have less food.
It's,
I mean, it's just I don't look at the world like that. I mean, there needs to be a balance between individual rights and collectivism. We can't just have it only thinking about me fighting for myself and that's it. But yeah, I'm super stoked that this passed, and I'm really anxious to see where they go with it. This does not guarantee healthcare. I want that to be clear. It does not guarantee that you have health insurance now. it means that the legislation, we basically by a very thin margin, 50.6%, basically the voters are saying that they're interested in having that as an option going in that direction. And that's what the bill was for. It was changing the language so that maybe they can work the funding differently, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And the fact that Tina Kotek won as governor will mean that we will continue to have task force that's going to be working on this or whatever. With Drazen, that would have been gone. For one thing, that would have been off the table.
Oregon has demonstrated a lot of leadership in terms of the viability of a public component to healthcare. I mean, public investment in healthcare and the, frankly, activist and cultural movements that have demanded healthcare as a human right in Oregon for decades have been wanting this direction to be where we move. And frankly, I think a lot of boogeymanning and hype and scaring and, back to Palin and talking about death panels, like for years, people have demonized the idea that the government can help protect you while also believing that they are the only ones that should protect you in a certain other form of domains, and being very pro-military and police and those things being a form of protection, but not also filling in the gap of the daily wellness component and having a decent relationship with a physician who cares about you. Everybody deserves access to those things. So I think your analogy is pretty correct.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'm glad that passed. And I found that out today, like literally 2 hours ago. So I saw, because I follow them I follow them on Instagram and whatever, the Healthcare for All Oregon. And they were like, we're gleeful, like we did it. They couldn't believe it because literally it's like 50.6%. It like barely passed. And there's only yes and no running.
All the measures passed.
There's no third party in a yes or no ballot measure.
I believe all the measures passed. Is that right?
I believe so. And I believe I was a yes on all of them. The way I was voting. The parks bill passed. The jail bill passed in Springfield. And Springfield residents are very concerned about crime. And I know that everyone that I talked to, basically there was a common response that I heard that they don't want Springfield to be like Eugene. Is definitely the response, that they want accountability for those who break the law. So take that as it is. I personally want that, but I also want to make sure that the rules apply to everyone equally, and I've talked about this ad nauseum on the podcast about police accountability, that we want, I don't think the only answer to dealing with like the drug issue, for example, is just policing. That's not the only answer. Healthcare, again, is one of the things that we need. We need access to healthcare so that people can get mental health care, and
all I really want to say about this, because, I didn't vote on the Springfield thing or nothing, is that Midas Well is a gentleman who I really loved. I found out he passed away recently. Did you hear about this?
Yes.
He's not a perfect reflection at all of my views on public safety or policing or anything like that. But yeah, I just kind of think of what he would have thought about this.
What would that be? What would he think?
Oh, well, he was an abolitionist in general, and believed in a whole host of other methods for ensuring public safety.
So abolishing police?
Did you hear about this? I mean, I don't need to get into it too much, but he was part of Black Unity, and he was a march leader, and he was prominent here in Springfield and in Eugene, and passed away recently. It was really hard to hear. On the 26th, there's going to be, for people who knew them, they used they them pronouns, as my understanding. The 26th, if you're an ally, show up. That's just what I think of right now, because that's where my heart is at. Another thing I was thinking about saying during healthcare is, like, we can humanize these conversations more if we really think about the people involved. And that's
100%.
That's just where this gets to, because I don't know that much about
the Springfield situation.
Yeah,
I
was only thinking about the 4 state.
I voted for it. I voted for it because, Sean Van Gordon and I talked about it, and you can go listen to the podcast that I had with him. We talked about it a lot. And I basically, I have faith in the direction that the new police chief Hiura is taking Springfield, and I'm going to give him a little bit of time to build a culture. And I mean, so far there's no reason not to. And I like what Sean said on my podcast about how people like Barbara Kenney, who continue to put his feet to the fire, he embraces that. He welcomes that. And, because Barbara Kenney, her adult kid was killed by gunfire. Stacey Kenney was killed by police, and it was excessive force, and it was a completely uncalled for situation. And yeah, so there's a lot of people in leadership right now in Springfield that actually embrace that kind of accountability, and so I'm optimistic. We'll see. I wouldn't say I have hope.
I think that I've run into very few people on the far right or Proud Boys that think the police are perfect and great. And
well,
we should not misrepresent how anyone thinks, or try to get to know people and what they're about and why they believe what they believe. I've seen Back the Blue, but I don't really even think that everyone, if you go to a Back the Blue event, would probably think that, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess people are complicated, and because there's libertarians who don't like police that are right wing.
For sure,
there's all sorts of things, and there's people on all sides who have positive views and of police and appreciate police interactions in their lives where unsafe situations have been intervened with and support has come to victims.
Police, when you say police as a whole, just like anything, I think that's an unfair thing, because police departments have a certain type of leadership. And we are seeing with the passage of Gun Bill 114 that there's sheriffs across the state that are like, we refuse to enact these new laws. I personally spoke about it before the election, before the votes were counted in the Gun Bill 114, that leaving the sheriff's departments to be taking on the task of registering guns and giving the permits, I'm not a fan of. I wasn't a fan of that in the gun bill. We'll see what sticks after litigation for this bill. But, there's sheriffs that immediately said, we're not going to enforce that. And it's like, no, you're going to do your job or you're going to be removed. And this is why a lot of people, especially young people that are not going to stand for that kind of stuff, are like, leaning towards abolitionist mentality. I don't agree with defund the police, but when you have people that openly, publicly in newspapers that are sitting sheriffs that say, okay, this new law, we won't enforce that. That's not going to happen. No. That's not your job. You don't get to decide which laws to enforce. You have to enforce the law. It's not your job to write the law. And so, that is unacceptable for me, for people to say that they're just not going to do it. And I know that there's going to be all kinds of people that'll cry foul on it, and I'll point out the hypocrisy in their argument, because they will, this is the problem with that people have with police. If we're not going to see accountability and the same treatment equally across the board, then we're going to cry foul, period. And we're never going to stop until we start seeing accountability. And, the gun bill is going to be massive, and it's going to be something that's going to cause a lot of anger and vitriol in our society, in our area, especially where I live in Springfield, that you will feel it, and we had a school shooting in Springfield in 1998. And this is the first time that we've seen anything legislative that's tried to address anything. I don't know if it would have prevented that, but at the same,
right.
I don't know. I support some of the stuff in the universal background checks. But there's going to be a lot of, I would imagine that some of the sheriffs that are crying foul about the enforcement of the permits for the guns, it's because they themselves have guns that would be illegal.
I don't get that fired up talking about guns. So I don't have that much to contribute to this conversation. My partner did not vote for 114. I don't really know if I need to put my private vote on the record for it, but I'm just not that enthused to talk about it. It sucks when it's very painful and sad when people have their lives torn apart by gun violence. That sucks. And then there's also always arguments about, and sometimes those arguments are sound, that like we don't know how to prevent that, or there's no single bill that will prevent every. I shouldn't have said that's the sound argument that we don't know how to prevent, because we do. The Centers for Disease Control should be able to study gun violence as a phenomenon, a public health phenomenon. We can use data and figure out how to reduce the likelihood of death.
Well, I want to be clear too. I'm not talking about the bill itself. I had my own issues with. I vocalized that. I'm just saying that if the law is put into effect, the sheriffs don't get to decide if they're going to enforce it or not. That's not their job.
It seems to me that the magazine limit is a reasonable thing. For example, here I am.
And they said that. And they said that.
I don't want to talk about this.
And they said that they won't enforce it.
Yeah.
So it's like, wait a minute, like, you don't. I don't know. We'll see how that all plays out.
We have to pray that an incident that proves that they should have been enforcing it doesn't happen. But we don't have that assurance that incident won't happen. Somebody could do a mass shooting with those magazines and murder a ton of people anytime, and not only would it occur, it wouldn't be news. it wouldn't be news anymore if 3, 4, 5 people were shot.
Yeah, there's a mass shooting in Bend, and it lasted, what, 48 hours or less in Oregon?
These things are not news anymore, and that's really
pretty startling. Yeah.
And that's part of why I don't know what to contribute to the conversation because, for example, I don't really trust government, I'm, there's certain things where liberty has
100%
has a lot of merit. I was out shooting archery today. I love shooting archery. And so I just don't really know always where to go with these conversations. I'm really troubled when it comes to schools and malls and things like that. And I hope we can try to work together more to figure out.
So I got one more.
We're going to not accept it.
We're going to talk about is the slavery bill that passed narrowly, removing language from the state constitution, allowing slavery and involuntary servitude as a form of punishment. And I think that there's a lot to this. The fact that 5% of people voted no. I do think that even though slavery, I don't want to defend. I voted yes on this because I personally support people's rights in jail. Like that if they don't want to work, then that's fine. They're already having their freedom taken, and you can make the argument that well, they made that decision. But the thing is that I don't. It's difficult for me to explain quickly. But as far as the way that we've looked at crime and criminals, there's this thing in society that I think that we need to watch out for, and it's vengeance. It's people that want vengeance. You see it on social media. And so with this slavery bill, it's not to everyone that voted no on it. It's not about race. It's not. I really believe that. Some people it is, and that's troubling, but that's a separate issue. There's people out there that are like, you break the law, you need to pay the punishment. And the way that and it's true in some cases when you hurt families, that there needs to be some kind of swift justice, but it's the way people approach it with vitriol in their soul that worries me. That people have this kind of attitude of like, you see it sometimes where people's responses.
We're all seeing it.
Oh my gosh. It's not even sometimes, it's so inundating all over the place where people, I posted some memes or some quick little reels of my trip in DC, and I've gotten so much hate on them. And it's like people that are like, you baby killing asshole. And it's just like, dude, that we're not talking about the same thing, but it's just when someone is charged with a crime and it gets put on social media, people are like, hang them. They haven't even been found guilty yet of that crime. A lot of times they're not found guilty of those crimes. The court looks at the situation, goes, you know what, we're going to drop this, and yet we never hear those stories. I worry sometimes about how much when it comes to crime and punishment, people want vengeance. And I just worry about that. That's all I want to say. Now with the slavery bill, a lot of it was language. And I think that there was some prison or jails that were kind of worried about the way that it was language because it changes and adds more paperwork and some different things. But it is troubling to a lot of people to see 45% when there's something that's like, let's remove this, from the language in our Oregon Constitution. And people are like, no, I don't want to remove slavery. It needed to be removed.
I think there's a lot of common sense in that, dude. I'm very certain that slavery is a bad thing, and I don't think anyone should be uncertain of it. Pretty simple. Yeah. Even as a punishment for a crime, I don't think that's
not very much liberty. I'll tell you that much. But I understand people do break the law and they do need to be punished. But I don't know. That wasn't it. To be fair, it wasn't really written out very well for people to understand what it meant.
I think we're spending a lot of time on these measures, man. Like, I know you want to get to other stuff too. So
okay, let's move on.
We got the crux of it, and I voted for it, and I think you voted for it, and it passed. And
yeah. So now Joe Biden. I want to talk about Joe Biden because I think the midterm typically in history does not go well for the sitting president that's new. In the first
since World War II, it's always gone badly except for in 2002 because of the 9/11.
And so this is, it's pretty significant that I would call this a major victory for Joe Biden. And I would also call it's way too early to be talking about the 2024 election. But, Donald Trump decided to announce that he's running, and Joe Biden has definitely already said that.
You ever go to like high school basketball tournament back in the day and like the other team's getting announced and everybody in the student section is holding up a newspaper in front of their face like they're not paying any
that's
attention?
Basically what it was.
That's what I kind of want to be about that guy running for president again. It's like, got the newspaper in front of me. I know the shit you're saying. It's lame. It's I don't know. It's just I worry about a live stream saying lame because it's actually a slightly ableist term, but it's just played out, bro. It ain't tight. It ain't cool. Your own followers were trying to leave your ballroom and security wouldn't let them because the speech was boring.
Yeah. So as of right now, what grade would you give Joe Biden on his first term so far?
It depends. Like what I said about presidents before. I mean, if I said that every president can't get better than a D, then I would probably give him a D minus. I mean, I don't know if I want to give any president an A.
That's fair. It's such a stupid question.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so from expectation, like if I'm an educator and I'm like, this Joseph Robinette kid looks like he's gonna be meh, and then he outperforms my expectation. Yeah, maybe give him like a B plus.
Yeah, I'll say this. Okay, about Joe Biden. If you're talking about the balance of power in Washington, yeah, maybe he had a good midterm, right? And let's see some results now. I mean, there's been some stuff that's happened, obviously inflation, and you can't pinpoint one thing that's done that. It's not policies by Joe Biden. There's some talk that I've been hearing about Joe Biden bringing manufacturing jobs back. Let's see it. Let's see it actually happen. And that would be incredible. And Democrats have a
CHIPS Act.
Yeah.
The marijuana stuff.
Sure. That's marijuana will be definitely on the ballot to federally legalize in 2024. Mark my words. It will be federally on the ballot.
Optics are way too much of how we perceive our public policy
100%.
Nowadays. And so there's this idea that Joe Biden is a certain person who has no energy, doesn't diligently see policy issues through, and is, just unproductive or failing at his job. And it is just, I don't think it's true. I really don't.
Yeah,
I think it's more that he's a fairly conservative Democrat, a centrist guy who's kind of feeling like with this chance to have the presidency in a rare moment, he's kind of been able to work with people, activists who have said, this green energy policy, fighting for women's rights. He seems that his years and decades of legislative understanding of what the job of being a senator is and everything like that, it's playing into his ability to get things done. But a lot of people are just not, and I don't blame people for this. I more blame the media and society and the political system. People are not seeing federal government benefits on the ground in general. I think it's really rare that people really see that stuff. They might see their mayor at a Saturday market, or they might see, their sheriff, but they just don't see a lot of stuff from federal government. And so we're really sometimes we're talking about the conversation more than we're talking about the issues themselves, which might be what I'm doing. But
absolutely. So, I don't have a ton of time.
Yeah.
But I wanted to segue into this. So we are at about the halfway mark of the vice presidency of Kamala Harris. And so that, it brings me to a story about my trip to Washington. So I wanted to share this. So we went to Washington, D.C. on Tuesday night. We flew in on election night on the red eye. So I got there Wednesday morning. It was really wild. This is my first time in Washington, D.C., and it was really wild to be there during the election. We would run around town, look at the monuments, do different things. I went and toured the Capitol. I went to the Botanical Gardens, went to the Library of Congress, did all these different things, took some pictures in front of the Supreme Court, Lincoln Memorial, all these, iconic things that I've looked at since I was a kid. And to go back to my hotel room and to turn on the news and have it be election coverage, and they're right behind him is the Capitol, and I'm like, I'm there. It was pretty awesome. It was pretty great. And on Friday, which was Veterans Day, we were like, I think the best thing we could do on Veterans Day is to go to Arlington Cemetery. And so we hopped on a bus. Because we stayed about a block and a half from the metro station, which was amazing because you could hop on it super quick. You go over to Virginia.
That beautiful white arch of the ceilings of the metro, is that still?
There's different stations. But so and you can see my pictures if you follow me on socials. I posted a bunch of pictures of it and stuff. And so we're on the bus or we take a subway, and then we go to the Arlington Cemetery, And we walk up and we go in and they're like, "Are you here for the shuttle?" And we're like, "Yep." And I had no idea what they were talking about. I'm not going to lie.
Oh
and they were like, "Okay, so the shuttle," and this is what this woman says to us. She says, "The president's going to be here. But when you take the shuttle out to where they're going to speak, you're not going to be able to leave. Is that going to be okay with you?" And I said, "Absolutely. The president's here. This is incredible." So I get on the shuttle and it's basically like elongated golf carts. There's a row of 3 of them. And they told us there was only going to be 2 sets of shuttles. So it was a pretty exclusive event. And I'm looking around and there's military dignitaries, and then there's average everyday veterans. I mean, with jeans and Wrangler shirts and stuff, and NASCAR, whatever it is, like what you would. I mean, there's a stereotype, but like because veterans come in all shapes and sizes,
Sure.
But there's a certain type of veteran that I think of all kinds of people. But anyways, I'm just saying, average citizens were there with dignitaries. It was an awesome event. So I get taken out to this thing, and the guy in front of me, I said, we're going to see the president speak? And they're like, no, she misspoke. The president speaks on Memorial Day. The vice president speaks on Veterans Day. And the vice president, she's going to lay the wreath on the tomb of the unnamed soldier. And then she's going to walk over to the amphitheater and then give a speech. And I was like, this is amazing. I cannot believe that I'm getting to do this. So we take the shuttle, we go over there. It's pouring rain. I allowed Dana to convince me not to bring an umbrella. I don't know why, but all I had was a raincoat, a hat. I was wearing jeans. We had no idea what we were walking into. So we go out and I'm sitting pretty close, and you can go to my socials and you can watch a video that I posted with it. And we look over and there's Joe Biden, and there's the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and there's General Milley and a couple more of the generals. And I'm like, how is this happening? I mean, it was an exclusive event. I bet you that there was probably 500 people max.
Dude, like, Dr. Jill Biden has so much energy.
Oh yeah.
She's so tenacious.
Yeah.
Like the fact that Joe is presumably out of town, and she's still going to these functions because she believes in the government.
And it's a huge deal. I mean, she's worked tirelessly with veterans in the little bit of time that they've been in office. Her and Kamala Harris both are doing a lot to work with veterans. And they were talking about some of it, but they didn't want to make it a political event. But there was like the PACT Act that's, helping veterans. And I mean, there's just a lot happening that's positive. And, I got to say this too. There was no partisanship feel when I was in Washington. It was government work. I didn't feel that sense of that at all. The people in Washington, D.C. were so kind. You
were in the swamp, man. The swamp. No,
where we were staying was really close to the Museum of the American Indian, and it's Native American Heritage Month, and so there was a very strong Native American presence at the hotel that I was staying at. That was amazing. People, and a lot of veterans that are Native Americans, a lot. And so those, I didn't realize this, or maybe I was unaware, but I talked to a couple, and they were saying that Veterans Day is really big in Native American circles. And I was like, this is really interesting. And I got to tell you, after going to DC, my level of patriotism is extremely high right now.
Amazing.
And it was so incredible. I mean, some of the stuff that we got to do, and I want to give a shout out to my partner, Dana, because she is the best organizer of trips. And anybody that's followed us on socials will attest that the things that we do in a short amount of time is phenomenal. And so I'm very lucky for the life that I get to live. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that. 3 tips real quick before we get out of here, and I'm going to have you close us out. 3 tips if you go to Washington, D.C., and this is what it is. Tour the monuments at night. So take one of the hop on, hop off tours, the buses. They're corny and cheeseball, and the people that you're around are goofy. But that being said, it's a beautiful thing to see the monuments at night. And driving in DC is a nightmare. So you have to take public transit. And the monuments at night are so beautiful. Lincoln Memorial lit up. They do such a phenomenal job. They'll take you over to the Jefferson Memorial, to the FDR Memorial, and to look at Washington, D.C. across the Potomac River is just a beautiful thing. Now, don't go to the museums on the weekend because the lines are just absolutely atrocious. And then stay as close as you can to a metro station. When you look for your hotel, that's the only thing in DC that you should look for. How close is it to the metro station? If it's within a block and a half, then you're going to be golden, because then you can go to the 9/11 Memorial at the Pentagon. Then you can go to Arlington Cemetery and then be right back into the hub of DC. And so I think those are 3 really big keys. Thomas, I appreciate you so much.
You're allowed to send people to the Capitol, but the last president can't send people to the Capitol.
I don't want them to go break windows. Yeah. No, I mean,
would you say that this was a tourism storm? You were storming the. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, dude, you cannot tour the Capitol now without. Without feeling that and without thinking about it. I posted a picture of Nancy Pelosi's office, which it's not going to be her office very soon, but and you just think there was security guards blocking that door, and that's an everyday thing now from now on. Like they'll never, and they said something. They said we're not going to be able to go. What is I can't remember the room, what it's called, the floor. You can't go on the House floor, basically. And they said, the guy literally said this, and I call foul on it. But he was great though, the tour guide. But he goes, we can't go into the House floor because of, long pause, COVID protocols. And I was like, that's why. Because no one around, I mean, masks are recommended. There's no real sense of COVID. COVID exists just like it does in Eugene. Like where it's going to be part of our life. There's going to be some people wearing masks because they want to take those precautions. And then people are making the choice for themselves at this point, if they want to mask up. But in DC, it felt the same. There was nowhere that you had to wear a mask to go into. And so for them to say it's because of COVID protocols, I call foul. I think that there's a different reason that you can't go into.
Sounded like a tongue-in-cheek answer to me.
Yeah, it was a great tour, though. And one more thing that was interesting is how Donald Trump, just mentioning Donald Trump is a no-no. And it's a crazy thing that's the truth. We went to the White House Visitor Center, and I just was looking around, and I just was kind of making an observant thought about how there's no pictures of Donald Trump. There was none, and there was a couple of Melania, and I found one of Trump, but there was a ton of Obama, and there's a ton of Bill Clinton. There's a ton of a bunch of different, Jimmy Carter, Reagan, and there was none of Donald Trump. And I made that comment to someone, and it was like I had, just said, you can't say those words to people. And that is so troubling to me, where if you just mention Donald Trump's name, it invokes a reaction that is negative for so many people, even if they're just mad at you for them loading what you think about him in their mind, even if they defend him. It's just, he's a train wreck for our society. And so I don't know, but
yeah, but if I talk about like a diarrhea covered banana split,
that's exactly,
I could bring that up, and I can't be mad that someone else is like, oh, that's gross. It's like, you brought up the diarrhea covered banana split.
I don't even know what you're talking about. So Thomas,
I'm just saying people are going to react foul to stuff that's foul.
Well, but it just is. It's an interesting thing.
I get you though. People assume a lot based on you bringing that up. Probably.
I did. And I was wearing a Wrangler shirt, so who knows?
Yeah.
So the next few months, what do you got going on? We're going to play one of your songs at the end of this, but what do you got going on?
At the end of this, for the audio listeners, you get to hear literally is such an exclusive. I've dropped tracks on your shit before, but this is like my first single in a long time, and it's coming out for real on Thanksgiving, which is my birthday, November 24th. But Air Fryer is the song, and we're going to play that. I'm really excited about it because it's my first beat that I've ever rapped on and released as a real single or anything. So I'm really excited about that. And, I'm really hopeful that in a couple of days, we'll know the result of the Wow Hall CCPA Community Center for Performing Arts board election. Stepped up to that, was recruited by the chair and the vice chair, which was really nice.
Yeah.
5 openings for 6 candidates. So I'm going to feel really left out and like I was really an underperforming candidate if I'm the one person that doesn't get on it. But that would be really neat because we want to improve educational programming in the space and really make it continually more relevant to more of the community, as well as making it more safe. So really excited about Wow Hall. Always trying to strive for more influence and unheard voices in the city of Eugene government too. So like continuing to be involved with Human Rights Commission, Willamette Natural Area Citizen Planning Committee, as well as just advocating at public comment at meetings and all sorts of good stuff. So
yeah, Thomas Hiura, thank you so much. We're gonna get out of here.
Thanks, y'all.